Hello, I'm Marcia Ribot.
I am Patricia Rodriguez.
And together, we are Little Soldier Productions. We are foreign artists
based in the UK.
And over the last 10 years, we have made and toured work all over the world.
We love it, but it's not always been easy.
So we have invited our friends and collaborators who share the same passion.
And we have asked them what it's like for them and how they make it happen.
We want to know what gets lost in translation.
What can't they travel without?
And their best border control stories.
Welcome to They Make It Happen,
a series of online conversations about the ins and outs of making and touring work internationally.
Carolina Ortega is a Venezuelan director, dramaturg and performer. She studied MA Text and Performance at RADA and Literature and Creative Writing at the University of London. She trained in physical theatre at LISPA and City Lit, as well as with John Mowat Lee Delong, Lorna and Philippe Gaulier. She trained in experimental performance at the Smash in Berlin and studied documentary and biographic theatre direction and dramaturgy at Universität der Künste in Berlin.
Directing credits include I Gave Him an Orchid, What the Circus, Freedom Hurts, and No Way Out, produced and toured between UK and Germany. Other directing credits include Ensonglopedia of the British History, E of the Human, What Silence Has to Say, and Revolving Path with Alex Carrillo. She's currently directing Gozde Atalay's new work NOMAD, to be premiered in 2022.
As a dramaturg, she's worked with Nassim Soleimanpour between Ireland and Germany and Nassim Soleimanpour and Jesper Pedersen in Denmark. She has worked as a dance dramaturg with Alex Carrillo and with Enrico Di Way. Other dramaturgy credits include Fuenteovejuna for Tangram Theatre and Earth Calling with John Hinton.
Hello everyone, we are tonight with Carolina Ortega. Hello Carolina. How are you?
Good.
See you? So we are in our series of They Make It Happen, which is focused on international performers, makers, producers, and we have chosen one of the most international makers I've ever met, Carolina Ortega. I think I met her. I met her in Berlin, but we have a lot of connections through British theatre as well. And
before we start, we'd love to hear a little bit more from you. Just to tell us your story, how you are in Berlin currently.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So how you go from Venezuela to passing through France and England, a little bit maybe briefly in Spain, and ending up in Berlin. So we'd love to hear that journey.
So from Venezuela, my dad is Spanish, so I'm half Spanish. And it was 92, I guess you probably know a little bit that we have been having loads of crises in the last few years. And there was a massive crisis on 89 and then followed by a coup on 92, and my parents were getting really stressed out, and my dad was just like, okay, that's it, we go to Spain. And then I ended up in Spain and I didn't have a very good time there at the bit, I was just not easy to adapt. So I went to France. I was in France twice, 9 months, and then 6 months again, and had to go back to Spain. And then I was like, okay, I need to find some other place, and went to London to learn English. Actually, I went to London for 6 weeks in summer, kind of improvised with £200 in my pocket. I had no really plan, no idea of what the situation would be, and just arrived and found a job a week later. And back then I moved to London in 97, age is showing. And life back then was very different. Getting a job, I spoke no English whatsoever, and I had this little paper with a non-existent CV kind of going around going, I'm looking for a job.
We know this. I'm looking for a job.
And and that's kind of how I ended up in London. It was really unplanned coincidence of life that I actually stayed, from 6 weeks to 16 years. That's how long I ended up living in London. So Yeah. And then Berlin, you know, I guess.
So, so was it in London where you started to get in contact with theater makers, or was it prior to that you had a connection with theater in France? Or?
No, I studied ballet when I was in Venezuela, and I really wanted to continue my education somehow in the performing arts, but it was a no-no in my family. There was no one who really supported that. And when we moved to Spain, my training was kind of cut off, and I didn't really have any connections. So I didn't really know. And actually, until I got to London, I hadn't even started to consider again to what it was that I wanted to do. You know, I think up until this point, I was just like, okay, my parents take me away from my country. I land in a place where I don't really feel like I adapt. And, you know, I was just trying to find myself a place where I could be myself, you know, and this at the time happened to be London. And it was there that I started to meet people, make connections, study again. And actually, you know, it was at university that I started to reconnect with performance and live performance, and then ended up studying theater formally, and, you know, in all of the different versions and forms of it. So yeah, it was in London.
And then you moved to Berlin eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Was it like you got tired of London? What happened? What happened?
Not tired. I mean, you know, I guess, I mean, it was before Brexit. It's been 8 years since I'm in Berlin. But things were getting very difficult, you know, like, I mean, it's already not easy to be a theater maker, I don't think, anywhere in the world. But I mean, life in London was just getting impossible, and it was no fun to be, you know, like, it just became so stressful, and I just fancied a little bit more quality of life, you know. It's at one point, you know, like, I loved London for the time that I was there. It gave me a lot of things, but I also remember the first 3 months when I was in Berlin, and I was like, this is what it's like to walk down the street without, like, I have to get somewhere, super stressed, I have to push people out of the way, you know, like, it's just a completely different feeling. And I think I was ready to do that. And yeah, I wasn't tired, but, you know, also one of the big motivations to come to Berlin, apart from I love the city and I really wanted more quality of life, was the theater scene in Germany in general, but in Berlin as well, is different. Here, theater is art. And one of the things that was really making a dent in my feelings about my work in theater was that I was always having this sensation of, when people view theater as entertainment, you almost have to justify every thought of creativity in terms of, you know, oh, this is entertainment, it has to be like this all the time. And I find it very freeing to be in a country where there's a perception that theater is art, and it doesn't have to be liked by everyone, and it doesn't have to be approved of in every critic or paper or whatever, that there is a feeling of, okay, make art and not everybody has to like it. And even just in terms of how psychologically people think about it, I think it gives you a lot of freedom as a creator. So yeah, that was always a big plus in my mind. And there's a great theater scene in Germany, and particularly in Berlin, and very experimental. And I also like that inspiration, you know, to go and see things that were like just very, very different to what I was used to before. Yeah.
And we kind of forget, because we are in this train of, you know, British industry, and sometimes when you come out and you go like, oh my God, it's so freeing, and it's like, yeah, it's exactly that, like all the opportunity to truly experiment and try out stuff is amazing.
I think actually this, what you said is really true, is the train of British industry. I remember this stress of every time having conversations with colleagues, and everybody's like, oh, and what are you doing? Because I'm doing this and this and this and this. And it's like, you know, I just felt this sensation that we were always pushing pushing and pushing and producing and making, and he was almost like a relentless, like a hamster in a wheel, you know. And I didn't want to work this way anymore, you know. It doesn't, you know, I don't really think about I have to do a number of shows every year. I think about, okay, this is what I want to make, and I really want to make this, you know.
I think I love to kind of get a little bit more into that. We can kind of touch on it now or later on, but about the support and how, you know, like what it means when you make some work here, just like how long do you can you spend in a project, and what is like the support in here in terms of like the institutional, in Germany, like the institutional support for artists to create work, because I think that really shapes, you know, how long can you spend. It will shape, you know, the kind of work that you can be making, you know, if you have 4 weeks or you have like 3 months or so maybe
we can touch on that now. Let's
sure.
We are, you know, we did have a little structure, but we are the queens of breaking structures, and you know, I'm not gonna say rules. I don't think we have that. We are the queens of breaking the rules. No, we don't have that category just yet. No, but yes, like and I was talking to Mercé earlier about this. You are because you have been in so many places, and you have traveled so much, and you know there is always this question like, do you identify yourself with as an international artist? And we will get to this, but the fact that you have made work in all these different countries. Also, you go to Denmark every now and then, and you do stuff there as well. Like you have a vision of how things work in different places. So if you could make like a, you know, like you could go like, oh, here in Germany works very well. Here in Britain works very well. Here in France, you know, we can.
What are the things that you think that really work well in the places that you've made work, and what do we need to learn from these different countries?
Yeah, okay. We could just talk about this for a whole night. It's a very, this is I guess, you know, you could spend hours and hours dissecting this. So actually in Berlin, getting support, I think it's just as hard as getting support in London. In any big city where you have loads of artists living, there is a fixed pot of money for many more people. So, and where I live is still a fight for funding applications and for getting funding. And the funding is not very different in terms of what you would get. For example, when you're in London in Arts Council, you're still kind of counting like threads. But what is good here, for example, is that during the Corona crisis, there was grants for artists, and we were compensated for the loss of work. And this was available for a lot of people. And there were loads of grants for people that, even though we couldn't produce because of Corona, we were giving grants to do research without having to have an outcome, without having to have a presentation. And the funding structure in a way is similar, I think, now you've had so many versions of Arts Council since I did my last one that I don't even want to think about it. But the last time that I made an Arts Council funding application, I guess, you still had to have a venue giving you a premiere date before you could get a funding for a show, right? And this is also something that you would normally have to do when you're here. But during Corona, there were just like blankets of funding that was given to people so that they could investigate and make work, or, you know, just to retrain and reinforce the practice and make new collaborations. And this was actually really, really great. But in terms of funding, it's not very, very different. You know, if you're a big company, you get more funding. If you're an independent small company, you're also struggling to, you know, is this kind of fight. And what I think works well for me being here is that I think there is, from the point of view of theaters, there is more of a risk taking in terms of programming. I think people, I don't know if it's a question of funding. I think it's more of a question of a culture about theater, that theaters are more willing to take a risk with an artist and to do something that is a bit more, oh, we don't know this format, but let's try it. We've never seen it before. And they really pride themselves into finding experimentation, even if it's not necessarily in a finished form or, I don't know. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that theaters here are really kind of looking at what could be done, what haven't we tried, and okay, maybe it's a flop, but it's okay. To flop is totally part of the process of making live performance. But what doesn't work so well, for example, is that there is a lot of state theaters here, which is great. And they have ensembles which are employed to work. There are actors who are employed full-time to be actors, which is wonderful. But because they all work as a repertoire, there is no space for sitting companies. So when you're actually an independent company in Germany, there is a very limited amount of theaters that you can tour to.
Okay.
So in this case, as an independent maker, because not every actor wants to just work in one theater some people love it because it's also safe employment, it's well paid, you're always working as an actor, you always get your paycheck at the end of the month. And this is really good for some actors who just want to act and be jobbing actors. But for people who make their own work, it means that you have a very limited amount of theaters in which you will tour in Germany. And therefore you always have to make your work also aimed to be a little bit international. In this case, in the UK, it's great because if you're touring, there is
you have
plenty,
Yes, it's true.
So you have more options in that sense. So I think, for me, in terms of the funding that is available, there isn't a huge difference. I think the difference is more about the attitude and the culture that goes around curating and making performance.
Yeah. And how about residencies? How did they support their artists? Is just mainly with the state, it's also with the cash. How do residencies tend to work in Germany?
Well, actually, I've been applying for a couple just not too long ago. And what you have here is some very good residency programs where if you get the spot, of course, you get free space, you get accommodation, and then all artists are paid full salary. So, if you have 2 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever is the, stipendium for salaries, every artist that participates gets paid the full salary. So you don't, it's quite nice because it's basically, you don't have to worry about the financing, you know that everything is covered and you just go there and work. And there is some very nice ones. One of the ones that I applied for, PACT, is actually also open for internationals, I think. But I think maybe one person in the team needs to live in Germany, perhaps. Now I have to, but this is a brilliant residency. They go on, it's just a residency place. It goes on all year round, and you actually don't have to have a fixed outcome when you enter the residency. You just you propose an experimentation and an idea, and then after 4 weeks, if you have something fantastic, and if you don't, it's all about process and development, which I find amazing, actually.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's amazing. Shall we go back a little to Carolina, like what she's up to?
Yes.
Yeah, because we have talked a lot, we got a lot of information from, how things work. But no, we are very interested in you and what are you up to, what you're working on, and yeah.
Can you share it? Can you share it?
Yes. Share it.
So right now I'm directing a show solo with Gozde Atalay, who has worked both with Patricia and I before. And I'm really excited because actually on Thursday I'm going to meet in a new theater that has just reopened with a really exciting team. And we are hoping to do the Berlin premiere there. So fingers crossed. And yeah, this is a solo that has been written by Gozde and is about being a woman and being a migrant in Europe, you know, and we already developed about 15 minutes of the show, but there is a few bits that we want to rework, and there's more material to come. And it's beautiful, and I'm really excited because, you know, the theme is both tragic, but also in this form of a clown, bouffon, very funny, and also grotesque, which I love. So this has been really exciting to work on.
Sounds amazing. Like,
yeah.
I've seen in social media, it looks amazing. And Gozde is an amazing Turkish performer.
Is she based in Berlin as well?
No, she lives in Athens.
Yes.
And how did you manage to do that to develop the show in the last few months, or is during COVID and around that time did you manage?
We worked a lot online, so Gozde, I think we talked about it just before the pandemic started, but really briefly, she had this idea already for a while, and she had been in residency with Clémence, the other performer that we worked with in No Way Out, and developed this idea, and then she wanted to do something with it. And then we talked about, before COVID, you know, when he said, yeah, okay, we write, and, you know, we come, you visit me, I visit you, we talk about it. And then, you know, the pandemic started, and we were like, oh, okay, this is going to be a bit long. And we started doing this kind of weekly meetings on Saturday mornings, you know, over Zoom, kind of going, okay, well, let's talk. And, oh, you know, I thought about this, but kind of informal. They were not really rehearsals, but I think it was really good because in every creative process, there is always all these talky parts that, I mean, you don't really have to be in a rehearsal room for it, you know? And I think we got all the talking out of the way during the time that we couldn't travel and we couldn't meet. And we did a lot of research, you know, separate together, because, you know, she came already with this huge amount of material. And then she came to Berlin last year in September, and we worked together for 2 weeks. And some of this were ideas that we had already talked about, and some of it had already been devised a little bit by Gozde on her own. And then, you know, just putting it, you know, working together for 2 weeks was a little bit like, okay, let's try and see what we can come up with, you know, no pressure, but we did end up presenting 50 minutes, which I think was not bad for 2 weeks of work. And now we have a little presentation in a festival in somewhere in a part of Germany that I can't remember now.
Don't worry.
In the countryside. Somewhere in the countryside, there is a new little festival that a friend of ours is organizing, and we are invited to present also the work in progress, and we are hoping that then we'll be able to present in this place in Berlin.
Amazing.
So yeah, this is really, really exciting, and I'm actually just putting in a funding application with 2 friends and artists that we are really excited. It's kind of, for me, it's really interesting because it's creating a performance about people that have lost the sense of smell during COVID. And apparently it's a thing that things are not tasting the same anymore, but like really like having some really strange experiences. And I was invited to join this project. I'm really excited, actually. And we want to do it in a kind of very non-conventional way. So it might not be a sort of straight up performance. It might be something a bit crazy to see. So, yeah.
Great. So what's next?
Yeah, I think something we have touched a little bit on this, but I think you mentioned some before, identity, and because you've kind of been in so many countries, this thing about the identity, or do you identify with the kind of label international artist? Is it something that, and what does that mean for you? If you feel like that?
Yes, no. I don't know, you know, like it's such a weird, I mean, I guess I am. I just like, the label international artist to me sounds like, it sounds really annoying. And it's not really, I'm not a person who's jet setting around, doing shows, in like whatever. I'm actually a migrant that has moved around countries. And this is also, actually, I think I identify more as a migrant artist. And I think that's more my identity than an international artist. And I think, yeah, maybe it sounds the same to people from the outside, but I don't think it feels the same.
Yeah, the quality is very different. That you have to move in order to be able to make your work, or that you kind of you travel with your work. It's very different.
Yeah. In fact, I'm starting to feel a little bit like migrant. It's very good you said that. Very good. Yes, because I was thinking that the other day, because even though I am working in Spain now, I'm doing some work in Spain, I still have my professional work has got more, I have more stuff to do in the UK still. So, but I have started to feel like a migrant work, like I move for work. That's exactly,
And what's the impact that you think that has on you? Obviously, that will impact on your work and the work you actually make. How do you think that's your identity and having to travel because of wanting to be able to do your work? What impact that does have on the work in terms of like the themes that you touch on?
Or do you happen to work a lot with people in the same division or kind of identity?
I think it's more that actually, Patricia. I think it's, like, I guess like everybody who's worked in theatre and studied theatre, and very well that women are very underrepresented in theatre, like extremely, and so are certain groups, and when you come from one of those groups, then you naturally have a tendency to go, oh, I want to see more people like myself on stage. I want to make more that identifies with me, that other people like me can see, and we are not always just seeing the white guys on stage. It's like, come on, like, let's do, and I think it's more, the themes and the people that I work with, it sort of happens organically that you're just more interested, and I've always been more interesting in working with women, because there is just never enough shows made by women. There's never enough women on stage. There's never enough women running theaters or institutions, and we don't have enough representation. And it comes then the level of being a migrant woman, and then there's even more, like, so I think it was not necessarily something that was like a plan in my head, but I was just more naturally drawn to working in these themes. And of course with women, and migrant women in particular, was it just makes more sense, I guess. Not exclusively, because I also sometimes get hired to do directing or dramaturging jobs for other people who don't necessarily fit, and if I like the project and I like the people, then I will still take the job. But when I'm making my own work, then definitely the themes are very much in this direction. Absolutely.
I do have a curiosity now, like you work now, for instance, with Gozde, who is Turkish. English is not her first language. I guess you communicate with her in English when you're making. How is German for you at the moment? Like, do you make in German? Being in German, do you make more in English? Do you
ever make in Spanish?
Do you ever make in Spanish? In Germany.
This is actually I've never directed anything in Spanish, and it's my mother tongue. And this is weird, but it just hasn't happened. And I think because I've always worked in English, I sometimes even like, when we like having a conversation, and then I would have to jump into English straight away, like, because there's a word that I cannot translate in my head, and I don't know if this happens to you, because you both also...
We have conversations in Spanish. We start talking in Spanish, and then we move to English, and then we change to Spanish. If we talk about work, we tend to moved to English, or we did a workshop sometimes in Spain, we had to do the explanation in English and then we translate for each other because like our brain goes in a little bit of meltdown.
Yeah, now that I started to direct in Spain, it's like, I don't know, I think people think that.
What is the name of this thing in Spanish? I don't know. What is the thing?
Why is she talking strange words to us in English? What she is, you know, like probably this.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess if I was to direct something in Spanish, it would be the same. I would probably have to like frantically call my Spanish friends to ask for like words of technical things that I don't know. But I mean, and in German, no. So, okay, my German is okay, but directing is a different level. And I did a year-long certificate course, 2 years, which is before the pandemic actually, which was about documentary and biographic theater. Really amazing. I did it mostly so that I could like polish on my German theater words, which was really good, but it's still not enough that I feel like I could direct. So so I did this course, this certificate in directing dramaturgy for biography and documentary theater in this German university, and it was amazing. But it was actually, I did it mostly because of the theater lingo in German, and it helped a lot. But actually, I don't have enough confidence in my German to direct, not yet, anyway. Unless, I mean, it would also depend what you're directing. I think if you're directing a clown, then it probably would be fine because, you know, I could just talk shit German and the clown would totally understand me. But if I have to talk, like, if I have to direct something with like serious, and, you know, text in German is dense, you know, you have to be able to understand words properly to grab it. So not really, but I teach in German. I teach a theater course in a center for adults with disability, and they are very, very, very patient with me and my German. But I think it's one of the things where I'm kind of starting to loosen up to the habit of running workshops in German and getting the hang of it, you know. And we have projects every year, and, you know, I direct that with a German colleague, so it also helps to go, this is how you say it. That actually sounds good. Okay. So I think I will probably get there eventually, but not quite.
And
people speak English though, you know.
Oh, that's
And I was just wondering, with working with people from different countries and using different languages, do you ever have, is there any, when you are working with such international teams, is there any like cultural gaps that you feel they are really challenging for the work,
or useful for the work as well?
I think more useful. I mean, of course, like, when is a challenge, when is a cultural gap a bad thing? I mean, for me, it's an opportunity to see something, you know, and to explore something, and to, you know, actually misunderstandings and, you know, differences is a little bit like the spice of the whole performance. You know, but I think it also depends what you do, because we are devising, usually when I'm working, I'm devising a show deliberately with a group of people that are different cultures, you know. So actually for me, this is kind of like the salt of the creation, the fact that everybody's different, and cultural misunderstandings can be so funny, you know. There are so beautiful moments of comedy just because people are like, oh, I understood something, and oh yeah, haha. And I think it's really more an opportunity than anything else. I've never had a situation where I thought, but, you know, I'm not directing Shakespeare with accents or anything like this, so maybe, I don't know, maybe if I was, I would find I would feel differently. But I think with the things that I'm working is more an opportunity than anything else, and it creates some very, very funny situations. You know, like silly misunderstandings can, you know, sometimes just become even jokes in a show, you know. So
of course. And would you say that you pursue work abroad as well? Like, do you, or when you make work, you have like like an international agenda. For instance, us, when we make work now, because we always think about the possibility of touring in Spain. Then when we are making this bit in the show, we're thinking how will this translate to a Spanish audience? How is your experience with that, or you don't think about it at all?
No, I do think about it. It's not the main concern. It's not like the first thing that I'm thinking about, but I think it's important to consider these things. And I think especially, it's so much, you guys know this very well, it's so much effort to make a show, just even to produce from the line of like all the funding applications and all the stuff. Once the show is done, if you love it, you want to tour, you want to show it. So it's important to consider if your show is tourable, and to continue to streamline that more and more as you continue to do work. But I'm not making something just to fit into an international agenda. And I think, I don't know if even you can do that anyhow. I mean, perhaps, I don't know. But
unless you do something that doesn't have a lot of language, or then you know that you can cover easily like different markets. But yeah,
it's interesting when we started making the show with Gozde, we did make a choice to not use language, but it was also very linked with the thematic of a migrant who cannot speak the language of the country where they go to, but also because, and it's physical theater and it's clown. And then we were really asking ourselves, do we need language, in this context? Is it better to try to work without? And it has worked beautifully. She does use some words, but are like random words. And I love it. It also makes it really good for touring because you don't have to worry. I mean, subtitling, for sure, when you have two performers that are bilingual, you both can go, okay, we can do this show into languages. We can translate it, maybe, whatever. But it's hard when you have something that is text heavy to like then take it on an international tour, unless you're touring internationally always in countries that speak the same language, which, for example, in people that speak German always kind of do this kind of like Germany, Austria, Switzerland kind of thing. Or you have people in the UK that then tour Australia, Canada, US, whatever. But then, actually touring in Europe, you would,
Yeah. Do you have experience with like a text-heavy show that you had to take and tour, and you have to kind of adapt? Do you have to adapt, or when you're taking your shows to different countries, you have to adapt the content or adapt apart from like translate or doing subtitles?
I mean, the only text heavy, No Way Out was not very text heavy, but it still had a lot of text somehow for a physical theater show. And I think this one is the only one that I've done that has gone to with 3 countries with very different languages and cultures. And we didn't really have to change anything. It was, subtitling, I think, was the only thing that we had to consider. And we already had in our minds that we would only subtitle the parts of the show that were in English, as opposed to the entire show. Because everything is summed up in English at points of the show, but not really. And I was trying to think actually, but also like adaptations. I don't think we made any adaptations. I remember when we went to Lithuania that I had this panic of thinking when we arrived, because we didn't know, or I didn't know that we had been booked to play in a festival. This I knew. I didn't know that the festival was for younger audiences. And then we had this moment of panic of going, we have a performer that gets naked in the show. Patricia, is this going to be okay?
Can you say like when the show starts, well, the theater like full of young students,
teenagers.
And it was like hundreds of them. And then, like we started with, being in the stage, and then like we had like yeah, we had like a little clothes on, but yeah, and then I see in the front row, like these guys taking the mobiles. I was like,
did you tell them all?
No, I was like, well, if they take the mobiles out when I am in the middle of, you know, removing all my clothes, this is gonna be interesting. Because, yeah, I would probably do something with those phones, you know, like definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the only time where I was like, oh shit, okay, wait. And also like, you know, because this is the thing, this moment, I mean, it's, you know, it's a beautiful moment. It has to be in the show. But I was like, oh, actually, I don't know. Is this going to be okay with like teenagers in Lithuania? Actually, it was fantastic. They loved, I mean, of course they loved it, but yeah. But, you know, like they were totally cool with it. They were not like, oh my God, you know, like they were totally like, oh yeah, it's a naked woman. Yeah, it's fine. It's theater, you know. Yeah. There was a standing ovation, you know, like all the teenagers. We won an award. All the teenagers were like, "Oh, guys, what school of theater did you go to? We need to go there." Like, okay, where is this school of theater where all the ladies get naked?
That's not the point. Yeah. So, in terms of the audiences, then, because we are touching on a little bit on audiences now. Is there big, you were saying about the differences of as an artist making work in Germany and in the UK, but as an audience member, do you feel like, now that you know very well the audiences in the UK and now in Germany, is there big differences where you've been, like in those two countries and other places that you've been, in terms of how they view the work, or like will they take risks to go and see shows that maybe they don't know anything about, or what's the culture there?
I think this is for me a big difference. So like this is an artist also, like you're always super stressed out about what reviews you're gonna get, because if you don't get good reviews, people don't buy tickets, right? And I mean, I think this exists everywhere, but I think there's also here a little bit more of, oh, I like this theater, I'm going to go and check out what they're showing tonight, or I like this company and they have a new show and I'm not going to wait for the reviews. And even if the reviews are bad, the reviews is just the opinion of one person, you know, I'm still going to go to see the show. And I think that's kind of, you know, this sort of decision making of supporting an artist for a piece of work, regardless of the reviews, I think is important as an attitude. I mean, you know, I think especially in big cities, perhaps in smaller cities, it's a little bit different. And as an audience, I think, you know, I've also seen loads of stuff that is very strange. And I go, oh, okay, cool. That was not for me. But, you know, I think I'm also learning to kind of, you know, not just being on the side of the artist of, oh, yeah, I just want to make stuff. And, you know, if you don't like it, well, fuck off, you know. But I also want to be on the other side and go, oh yeah, that's not for me, but actually cool that they put this kind of things on, you know, cool that there is space for people to do stuff that, you know, even if it's not for me, but it's new or it's different or whatever. And, you know, that's kind of at one point, I think in the UK, I started to get a little bit bored because there was a little bit, you know.
Yes, sometimes it's
a bit samey and it's a little bit trying to please. And I know it's different because I of course, this is also really complicated because you know, theatres in the UK are not fully funded. They rely on selling tickets. So they have to have a product that is more commercial, that is more sellable. And I understand, like, from this perspective, all of these things. But what ends up happening is that often you end up kind of watching very similar stuff all the time. And it gets boring a bit, you know, which I don't feel here. Like sometimes you kind of like, I go and just go, okay, I'm going to go and see a show. And I come out and I'm like, okay, what the fuck was that? And I love it. I love it. Even if I didn't enjoy it, I love the possibility of that happening, you know, and I love the possibility that you as an artist could be the person going, I'm going to make a show that's going to make everyone go, what the fuck was that? And I'm going to put it on in a theater, you know? Yeah. And this is great. Yeah, you know? And as an audience, this is great. Also, it's really liberating, you know?
Taking risks and yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Carolina, I think, is it time? Is it time?
We have a few more minutes. Yeah, we have a few more minutes. I don't know, like we wanted to kind of touch a little bit onto the producing side.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, producing. Tell us your producing experiences, Carolina. International production. Put your international producer hat.
Yes, actually, it's an international agent. So I am working with Aranova part-time and Aranova is an international theater booking agency, and have been in the last couple of years. I actually started just before the pandemic, which is great time for theater booking. So I actually mostly take care of clowns, which actually is beautiful, totally in my comfort zone. And I'm also with them running a thing called the Sustainability Lab, which was a project that was started in 2021, which is actually looking at ways in which we can make touring more sustainable. So we did this research work and made a lovely little website with recommendations for touring in more sustainable ways. And we are now working with the amazing people from the Theatre Green Book, which is a British, I guess, I don't find the word now. It's the Green Theatre Book, no, the Theatre Green Book, actually. Look it up, it's great.
We'll put a link on after the video as well.
Yes, so we are now collaborating with them in expanding the touring sustainably part of the Green Theatre Book. And it's been great, it's really amazing. We are meeting wonderful people working in performing arts who are trying to make the work more sustainable and touring more sustainable, and also talking about what is the new way of working, and loads of people are sort of aiming towards slow art and slow touring, and there's loads of like really interesting things that people are talking about and that are in the
can you tell us a little bit more about the slow touring and what?
I mean, this is of course still, I think, a lot in the realm of theory, but actually Perform Europe, I don't know, you guys may have heard. So actually Perform Europe is actually piloting a little bit this idea of touring in a slower way. So I mean, there's a lot of different definitions of slow art, but in terms of slow touring, it's more about to make a tour more sustainable, you need to get more shows out of each engagement. So every time you travel, you try to do more performances and also have a more significant interaction with the communities that you are,
in the town,
where you're performing, right? So, I mean, I guess in the UK anyway, this is always practice that perhaps you do a workshop in a town where you are, but there's also like this talk of, okay, so you need to do more shows, but also what is a more significant way of interacting with the local community? Is there something else other than a workshop that you can offer, and sort of like structuring tours that mean that you are doing longer stops in places and, making more of an exchange. It's more sustainable for the artists, it's more sustainable for the environment, but it's also more sustainable for long-term relationship between the artists and the venues and the communities. And I think it's quite nice as an idea. Of course, there needs to be a lot of changes in attitude from the programmers in the first place, who only want one show one time and that's it, so there's a lot of challenges. It's like, I think people are starting to think about it and talk about it and figure out the funding sources to make this possible, but I think it's really early stages of
course there has to be a network of theaters, isn't it, in order for this to happen?
Absolutely. And I think this is actually one of the most important things that we are talking about at the moment in terms of making touring more sustainable, is like touring networks actually allow for this and facilitate this so much. And we see this, for example, in France, a lot of the touring happens within touring networks. I think Spain used to be like this. I don't know if it still is.
Yeah, they do circuitos.
Exactly.
You have it in each province. You have like a circuito you belong to, and you get the number of.
But
so actually, this is very sustainable. So this is very sustainable, that you go to a part of a country and you just go and do the run. So, you know, these are the things that we are looking into.
And in the UK exists as well in areas in the south. You know, like we were part of.
Yes, but you kind of constrain it within a timeline as well.
Yes.
So you do have that.
Yeah.
Really,
exactly.
really interesting.
Yeah, very good.
Sustainable.
Yeah, fantastic. Any more? Shall we go to the anecdote?
Yes.
Do you have,
I was going to say that.
Any anecdotes for lost, like losing jobs? You know, because we ask all our guests if they have any anecdote. It doesn't matter if you don't have anything, you know, like. But if you have any anecdotes you want to share about something really terrible that happened,
or something wonderful,
or something wonderful. Like,
no, you know, like nothing terrible. I remember that I once lost a suitcase with all my costumes in France.
That's good. That's a good
but I found it just before the show. This was this was also the only time I've been on tour in France. And it was also like the second time ever that I was on tour. So I was super nervous and like totally inexperienced and totally like, what's happening? And then like arrived and I was like, shit, I had 2 suitcases and I came to the hotel just with 1. Brilliant.
But you forgot it in the airport.
I didn't even, you know, and this is, I didn't even kind of go, oh, I have to wait for my big suitcase. I just went with a little one and just went la 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 la. And I was like, okay, yeah. So I totally forgot that I had a second suitcase.
What did you do?
It was fine.
But what did you do?
Called the airport and said, oh, is my suitcase still there? And they were like, yeah, your suitcase is still here. We'll bring it over. And I was like, okay, great. Yeah. It was completely a moment of clown of like,
what? That's good.
I'm in France, it's beautiful.
Brilliant.
I think last little question that we ask everyone, well, little or not little, we ask, because there's quite a lot of like students that watch our online talks, and we love if you can just give us any it could be like the best tip that you ever got in order to kind of survive and carry on in this industry, or the worst, so for them not to repeat, or anything that you want to share about your experience that might help a young generation of makers.
Yeah, okay, that's a tough one.
No pressure.
Just actually do it because you love it, and do what you love, and do it as well as you can, and push through. Because I think actually, you know, there is so much bad advice out there. Oh no, you have to be more of this kind of actor or this kind of actor, and yeah, just do what you love, and then you'll be good at it. I think that's my
brilliant, very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you, guys.
Amazing talking to you, and you know, very good, very good.
Really nice to see you both.
I admire you very much. Bueno.
Me too, both of you. And I bring your new show to Germany, please.
We'll try.
Yes.
Is there a network? Let's stay on after this.
I will send you some tips.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina.
Mama.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.